Good evening, everyone, and welcome to class. This is 17 o'clock. Very quickly. I'll just give 2 more minutes for others to join in because our facilitator is here. So, party chairpersons and party members, please endeavor you send a message across to your party members to join into class. Thank you very much, and see you in the next 2 minutes. So, good evening, everyone. This is 1702, and it's time for class. So, very quickly, I'll just introduce our facilitator for today, Miss Uchechi. She'll be taking us on the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. Very interesting and insightful class that we all can't wait to dive into. So, Uchechi is a legal practitioner and HR professional with a key focus on technology, law and regulatory compliance. She serves as legal consultant to the foremost inter-country adoption agency in Nigeria, Life Foundation and Danga Lifestyle. She's the head legal consultant of Zoe Legal, a corporate, commercial, and startup legal advisory firm in Lagos State. She has worked with several local and international bodies on fintech, lifestyle, telecommunications, employment law, and immigration. In addition to her legal practice, she's very keen on public advocacy and the education of Nigerian youths on politics and governance. Uchechi is called to the Nigerian bar and has obtained an LLM in international commercial law from the University of Hertfordshire. She runs a podcast called Zoe Legal, where she speaks on legal issues and is keen on using her platform to encourage awareness and education among the masses. So, ladies and gentlemen, our facilitator for today, Miss Uchechi. Welcome, it's great to have you here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, ma.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Trying to get my video started. Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's great to see, wow, 40 people in attendance. That's really good. Um, so thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here with the college and to see that, you know, we're doing better and better every year. I was once a student, maybe around maybe 6 years ago, um, 6 or 5 years ago. So it's really amazing to see how much the college has grown and the fact that there's still people who are eager and hungry to learn and acquire knowledge, because I believe that knowledge is power. Um, and to do the right thing going forward. I know that our country is, there's a lot to be desired with the state of our country, but I want to assure you that you're not taking the wrong step by being here, by educating yourselves, by acquiring knowledge and doing the right thing. So I want to encourage every one of you. I'm sure that you have attended other classes, and everyone who speaks on this platform, they're very seasoned. They have practical knowledge, and you can rest assured that you're in a good space. So I have a slide. I don't know if the moderator is going to assist with putting up the slide. Yeah. Is someone going to assist with sharing the slide, or I should
Yes,
share?
ma.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so while that comes up, just a brief introduction to why I am qualified, I would say, to speak to you on this particular topic. So I've obviously been called to the Nigerian bar, and for the greater part of my education or academical study, it had a lot to do with the Constitution and learning about the moral and legal code that's acceptable in this jurisdiction. So we're going to just I'm going to take you through the a general overview of rights, what it really means to have rights. And I'd also like you to hear from you as well, what you think about some of these points, right? So we're going to also talk about the legal framework for citizens' rights. So what really advises our rights as citizens? What are those bodies or statutes or regulations that tell us about our rights? And obviously, because we're talking about our civic and political rights, we're going to limit it to those aspects in the Constitution and in other regulations. And then we will explore very briefly the Nigerian Constitution as it pertains to our civic and political rights. Okay, so to start with, I'd like to hear from everyone here. Can you just tell me off the top of your head, when you hear the word rights, what comes to mind? When I mean, you've probably heard it being said, I know my rights. What are your rights? How dare you do that? What rights do you have to do that? So on a very general, broad view, can someone unmute and just let me know what you think rights are? What is right? What does it mean to have rights? Anybody can unmute and speak. Anybody? What are rights? Okay, there's Sheriff Jaya Ola.
All right, good evening, ma.
Good evening.
So, from my understanding, because I also happen to be a law student, fortunately for me. So, rights are the fundamental privileges that the government owes to its people. These are the opportunities and privileges that are contained in Chapter 4, Section 33 to 47 of the Constitution. The rights that are inalienable, the citizens cannot be deprived of this right unless in certain emergency situations. So that's what I understand, ma.
Spoken like a true lawyer, giving us the sections and all of that. Thank you, my upcoming colleague. I appreciate that. So we have Akinola. Akinola, can you unmute as well?
Okay.
Hello, ma.
Hi, good evening.
Okay, yeah. So, right to me are like privileges that are inherent to people regardless of their sex, race, nationality, religion, or probably status. So these are things you can enjoy regardless of who you are what you are, where you are.
Okay, that's a good definition. But sometimes rights are specific to a group of people. So that would be the only caveat I would have on your definition. Sometimes rights are the exclusive reserve of a group of people, just as provided by any sort of regulation. But yes, thank you. Thank you for that. All right, so we have a couple more hands up. Amma, would you like to unmute as well?
Okay, good evening, man.
Good evening.
Okay, so for me, I think a right is a legal and moral liberty, that someone has to express him or herself in a certain way without restriction.
Wow. That's a very good definition. But also I would say you would see during the course of our conversation that sometimes rights do have restrictions. But thank you. I love the way you couched that. Okay, so we'll take two more, Tosin and then Ajibola. Tosin, do you want to unmute?
Good evening, Ma.
Good evening.
So, in my own opinion, I believe rights are like claims or a sense of, not a sense, but like entitlement to something, more like but just like in a legal way. A claim or entitlement in a legal manner.
Interesting. So would you say that your any kind of right you have must be codified? Are there rights that you have that are not necessarily found in any book of law? Can you claim rights that are not codified?
I think it depends on the kind of rights we are talking about, but in the generality, I believe this applies to everybody. So there's just the legal framework. We just work fine.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. All right. So lastly, we'll have I think there was one more person. Ajibola.
Okay, I don't think Ajibola's hand is up. I can only see Sheriff and Salako.
Okay, Salako. I think Sheriff has gone already. So Salako can take the last.
Okay.
The last.
Okay. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
So I can define a right. Right is defined as the entitlement of the people, either in that particular region, assigned to. Okay, so if the government rights is entitlement to certain
I can
people.
barely hear you.
Oh, yes, sir. It can be defined as the entitlement towards a certain group of people who live in a particular region that is covered by the law.
Okay. Thank you very much. And let me say that all of you have spoken very well. It's good to know that I'm in a class full of intellectuals. So thank you very much for offering your voices. So yeah, I would say to put it all together, you all have a good idea of what rights are. So I'll just summarize by saying that rights is a power or privilege held by a group of people, usually as a result of a codified rule of engagement, right? It could be a law or a regulation or a status, right? It would also be enforceable by legal institutions and can be invoked by a court of law, right? So if you claim to have rights in any sort of society, it should be codified and it should be enforceable, by a court of law. So thank you everyone for saying that. Rule of law. Can you take off this? Can you take off this slide? Sorry, just to ask again. can someone talk about the rule of law when you, okay, I would excuse the lawyers for now, because I know that, yeah, you would probably know a thing or two about the rule of law. Well, can someone just, with the idea of rights, can someone talk to us about rule of law? What is the rule of law? What are the principles of the rule of law? Anybody, when you hear rule of law, what comes to mind? I don't want any lawyer to answer, because that's a huge giveaway. So when you hear the rule of law, what comes to mind? Sorry, I like a more interactive class. So I would like to hear from you. Okay, so we have Samson Dean. Can unmute. Just a very simple definition, nothing to Samson Dean Salako. I don't know if I can unmute. We have a couple of hands up. Is someone helping us to unmute them, or can they unmute by themselves? So we'll take the 4 hands that are up: Samsudeen, Aisha, Ajibola, and Zachariah. Can someone help us unmute?
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, Aisha, yeah, go ahead.
All right. To me, rule of law means body of agreed rules and regulations guiding like citizen in a country. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting definition. All right. So let's have another person. Samsudeen.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, from my own perspective, I think the rule of law is synonymous to the word accountability. It's what puts everybody in check, both the governed and the people in government, both public and private institutions. Without the rule of law, it's just going to be a monkey jungle.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. And next person, Zachariah. Oh, I think, okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I believe that rule of law means that everybody, irrespective of their social status or economic status, they have access to justice, and even the governments or the rich, are not above the law. Like everybody can be brought into justice. Nobody is above the law. That's my simple definition of rule of law.
Very, very good. So when you hear no one is above the law and everyone is subject to the law, that's really the summary of what the rule of law is. Everyone comes under the, so in a general connotation is that the creation, I'm sure you've learned about the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, the 3 arms of government. So it's the overarching concept and principle that guides that whole legal movement. So the creation of the law, the enforcement of the law, even the adjudication of the law, all of those relationships are regulated even within the law, so that nobody can place themselves above the law, right? So everything that you see in a society that has to do with checking or where one person's power starts and ends, where one person is subject to another person, where one office is subject to another office, where the offices are even divided. All of those things are all principles that govern the rule of law, which really is that nobody is above the law, right? So you would find that in a democratic environment. So you can move to the next slide. You'll find the rule of law in operation in a democratic environment, because the principle of democracy is that the government, the people, for the people, and from the people, right? So if the government is for the people, that means the government should also come under check. The government should be subject to the legal principles in that society. So like I wrote here, the rule of law is a liberty-centered constitutional concept which stipulates that everything must be done in accordance with the law. So ideas such as equality before the law. So what you do for A, you do for B. When you have judicial precedents, it's really saying that if there's a principle that applies for one person, it should also apply for other people, especially when the facts of the case are similar or very closely there are close similarities between the facts of the case. So you have like checks and balances, the fact that the law is supreme. That's why we would always refer to the law books when we want to find out the truth. So no one person can come and say, oh, this is what it is. What does the law says? Is it what you've brought out, or whatever new regulation that you're giving, is it contrary to the Constitution, which is like the grandfather of all laws? Is there something that is in opposition with the Constitution? If it is, then such a regulation would be void or voidable to the extent of its conflict with the Constitution. So principles such as superiority of the law, separation of powers, like I already pointed out, there's a reason why powers are separated. There's a person who creates the laws, there's a person who enforces it, and there's a person who adjudicates over it, right? There's a reason why these powers are separated, and it doesn't lie with just one body or one office. Even the fact that we have like separate organs of government, is it organs or arms? There's like different terms to it, but then you have the federal, the state, and the local government. There's a reason why they're separated in that sense. There's also the principle that the law should be known and predictable, right? So the laws obviously are codified. It's not just one person coming to tell you all the time, this is what the law is. You can access it. You can have it's printed out. You can read it. Sometimes it is amended, but that amendment obviously needs to be put out to the public. There was a time the Electoral Act was amended. Obviously, we all have a copy of it. We also have the I believe the CAMA was also recently amended as well. So yes, it has to be known, it has to be predictable, equal application across board. Now I'm just giving you the ideal, like this is really what it's supposed to be. I know that there are lots of questions as to whether we really practice rule of law here in Nigeria, but really this is what is in the body of laws. We have a rule of law system in Nigeria. The laws should be just and robust, accessible enforcement, and an independent judiciary. Yes, an independent judiciary, and everyone have a right to participate in the society, right? So these things are sort of like a way to check and balance powers in a democratic society. You say you're operating a democratic society and you don't have the rule of law in place, or one aspect of the rule of law is suffering, for instance, independence of the judiciary. If someone in the executive is footing the bills of someone in the judiciary, can you really say that there is independence of judiciary? If you cannot assess the enforcement of your rights, right? Can you really say that you have a good democratic situation in your country? If there isn't a proper separation of powers, if the executive is influencing what the legislative is doing, if there isn't a superiority of the law. If one person has the right to do whatever they want to do or act contrary to the law without any repercussion, that shows that the rule of law in place in that society is very weak. There's a problem with perhaps the system of government or the law itself. So we're just going to go through some of these concepts, and then we would discuss amongst ourselves what we believe the rule of law in Nigeria to look like. I know that the majority of people here would definitely, because I've had this class for several, I've had several classes like this, and everyone definitely, the question is usually, do we really have rule of law in Nigeria? Do we really have rule of law in Nigeria? But yes, I'd also like to hear from you what you think. Exactly what aspect or what principle of the rule of law do you think is lacking in Nigeria? And what principles do you think that we've gotten right, if we have? So yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we had touched on rights. I say here that rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. Rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of a people or owed to a people according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. It's important to point out here that rights are always they're always specific to a society, right? So by virtue of the fact that you are a Nigerian citizen, you have